Welcome back to SM Sports Radio, and this is On the Road edition as we come to you from the greater Atlanta area. We are in town for the Braves-Reds series, not that you could tell by what we're wearing or anything, but it's been a pretty good time so far, at least for me, as the Reds took the first game yesterday, and Samuel, I think, is hoping the Braves bounce back, but one of your guys his wife had a baby, so the lineup's going to be a bit different looking for y'all tonight, so how are you feeling about the rest of the series?
Yeah, so first off, congratulations to Austin Riley and his wife on having their second child, I believe. It was a little bizarre to see Austin leave the game in the top of the ninth inning
Some
with
fans are very
one
unhappy.
out mid 2-2 count on Reds player there. That was definitely interesting, but once I thought about it a little more and checked Instagram, it all started to add up a little bit there. So congratulations to Austin Riley. Unfortunately, that does not mean congratulations to me or the other 40,000 Braves fans that will be in attendance today, because the lineup is going to be pretty scuffed. Um, Luke Williams got called up to replace Austin Riley on the paternity list. Uh, Good news is we'll probably get to see Nacho Alvarez again. Hopefully he can get his first career major league hit. And so I'm still excited to get back out to the yard tonight.
Yeah, I am as well. Tonight's matchup will be Chris Sale versus Nick Martinez, and the Reds will be taking a bullpen day today before going back to Frankie Montas tomorrow versus the Braves TBD starter that is yet to be announced. But that's what we're doing down here. That's why we have the whole wired setup going everywhere. That's why we're holding the microphones. That's what's going on this week. But let's get into the actual meat of the show today, starting with college football. And today we're going to give you our top five for the Heisman Trophy. Guys we think are going to be right up there at the end of this year and our favorites to win the award. And I'll go ahead and start off with my number one, and that is Carson Beck, University of Georgia's quarterback. And anyone that's saying Beck is just a game manager, he doesn't have arm talent, or he's not that good of a quarterback, you didn't watch Georgia last year. Carson Beck was the sole reason they won multiple of these games, including the Missouri game. He was incredible in that game, and this is a guy that I think is going to be the real core leader of the team this year, and one of the few guys that has not been arrested for reckless driving despite owning a high-performance
Yet.
vehicle. So, yeah, yet. But Carson Beck, I think, is going to absolutely impress this year. I think George is going to be very, very good this year, so he is my number one guy.
My number one is going to be Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback from the University of Oregon. This is pretty self-explanatory. He's been successful at two stops so far along the way at UCF and at Oklahoma. This year he gets into Dan Lanning's system, a system in which we saw Bo Nix flourish and become a Heisman finalist. And I think Dylan Gabriel is a little bit better even than Bo Nix. So I think him getting into this system, and a lot of talented playmakers around him, a lot of receivers with game-changing speed, and I think Oregon's going to be a pass-first offense. So that's the main reason that Dylan Gabriel is my number one, and pretty much the reason that Carson Beck actually is not on my list, because the five that I selected are in pass-heavy offenses, and I think Georgia's going to be a little too balanced this season on the ground and through the air for Beck to put up the numbers that are necessary to win the Heisman. I definitely think that he's an incredible quarterback and a great player. Just doesn't quite crack my top five personally, even though he is the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman.
Well, there's so many good candidates this year. It's completely understandable if my top guy is left out of your top five, because I feel like you could convince me on about 10 different players to put on
For
this
sure.
list this year, but we've had to obviously whittle it down to five. And my number two is going to be the Missouri quarterback Brady Cook, who he has a Luther Burden back this year, and he's pretty amazing in his own right. This Missouri offense was incredible last year, should only get better as these guys develop, and Eli Drinkwitz continues to coach them up, and they have a soft schedule too as far as SEC teams go, so I think that's going to really benefit them. I think there's even a chance Missouri could go undefeated this year, and if you think an undefeated SEC quarterback is not winning the Heisman, then you're frankly insane.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of share that same sentiment on Cook. He is number four on my list. I'll get to that a little bit later. Number two on my list is Jalen Milroe, the quarterback from the University of Alabama. A lot of this is due to the fact that I thought he showed major flashes last season, and
Definitely.
the fact that he was a dual threat quarterback that super dynamic and extending plays. We saw him make some clutch plays, including at Auburn, unfortunately, for my co-host sitting over here that witnessed that in person on the field,
Yes.
actually. But Milroe gets a new head coach this season, Kalen DeBoer, coming over from Washington, and we saw how spectacular Michael Penix Jr. was last season in Kalen DeBoer's system. I honestly think that Penix had an argument to win the Heisman, and I think Jalen Milroe's ability to extend plays and be a true and viable dual threat quarterback is going to produce a lot of quote unquote potential Heisman moments this season, especially with that SEC schedule. I don't necessarily think Alabama is going to be world beaters this season. That's not what I'm saying at all. I just think Jalen Milroe, especially stepping into another year as full-time starting quarterback, is going to take another step up with an offensive-minded head coach. So he comes in at number 2 for me.
Yes, I would say that, though maybe not the best pure quarterback on this list, he is the most dynamic athlete and dynamic player on this list for either of us, despite not being in my top 5. So my number 3, you've already mentioned him at the top of yours, is Dillon Gabriel. We've talked about the Oregon offense already. It's really going to be a lot through the air this year under Dan Lanning. It's going to be an elite speed offense with Dillon Gabriel, then Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson on the outside, 2 great targets to throw to. And then I think this team could honestly get into some track meets with teams like Ohio State this year. And so if you have Dillon Gabriel really carrying a team to victory in that type of a game, that's definitely, you can build a Heisman resume very easily off those type of games. So he is at my number 3.
Number 3 for me, and for a lot of the same reasons that Dillon Gabriel is number 3 for Micah, is Jackson Dart, the quarterback at the University of Mississippi, otherwise known as Ole Miss. Jackson Dart was incredible last season as starting quarterback of Ole Miss, and I think he's kind of in a spot as well to take that next step forward under Lane Kiffin. We all know that Lane Kiffin is one of the greatest offensive minds in all of college football, and I think Ole Miss is going to be near the top of the SEC. I think they have a chance to win the SEC. I definitely think they will be in the college football playoff. So this is kind of putting Dart on this list for me, especially at number 3, is a lot of respect to Dart for sure, but it's even more respect to Ole Miss and how good I think they're going to be. I think their offense is going to put up historically high numbers, and that Jackson Dart is going to be the catalyst. So Jackson Dart comes in at number 3 for me.
Yes, I could definitely see that happening as well. Dart, another guy that didn't quite make my list, but like I said, there's so many guys you could put on here. It's so close. Number 4 for me is going to be Texas quarterback Quinn Ewers. He's got a massive arm. I know he lost a lot of his receiving talent, but there's new guys waiting in the wings there at Texas. The recruiting has been incredible so far under Steve Sarkisian. I think it's going to be a very, very good Texas football team this year, and Quinn Ewers has struggled off and on, both with health and then sometimes with some accuracy problems. I think he really irons those out this year in his last year of college football, and I would expect him to be just on another level this year. I don't think he gets quite to the numbers that you see maybe from a Beck or a Cook or a Gabriel, which is why I have him in 4th, but he is definitely going to be the leader of this Texas team this season. And for a Texas team that has an upside, maybe even as high as an 11-1 SEC champion, you could definitely see Ewers winning the Heisman as a result of that.
Coming in at number 4 for me is a guy that was in the top 3 for Micah, and that is Brady Cook. I definitely think that Cook has a very viable path to the Heisman Trophy. Missouri has a somewhat favorable schedule, only 3 or so really tough games, including one against Alabama, one against A&M, and I'm forgetting the third one off the top of my head.
I think they play Oklahoma as well.
Oklahoma, that sounds right. But obviously you get your number 1 receiving threat back in Luther Burden, as Micah kind of alluded to earlier. And Brady Cook is another guy stepping into another full year as starting quarterback. Put up great numbers last season. Honestly had a shot to win at Georgia. And with Missouri's somewhat favorable schedule, I think they have a path to go undefeated in the regular season. At worst, I think they go 10-2, and I think Brady Cook is going to be the catalyst of that offense once again, especially with the loss of their starting running back, whose name is leaving my mind right now.
Cody Schrader. So his departure, I think, opens the door for Brady Cook to even reach new heights in terms of passing yards and touchdowns and things of that nature. So number 4 for me is Brady Cook. Yes, I've already outlined why I agree with most of that earlier. Then my number 5 is actually the only non-quarterback on this list for either of us, since Heisman really is now that quarterback award like NFL MVP is. And this non-quarterback on my list is Donovan Edwards, the Michigan running back. A lot of people are saying Michigan's going to fall off this year because of the loss of Jim Harbaugh. I don't know why. The entire defense basically is back. A lot of the best players in that defense are back, and Mason Graham on the defensive line and Will Johnson out there playing corner. And Donovan Edwards, a lot of people talked about Blake Corum. Blake Corum was so good. I think Donovan Edwards is a more dynamic player than Blake Corum. I think you're going to see, honestly, an even more run-focused offense, as hard as that might be to understand. after what you saw last year from Michigan. But with Alex Orji at the helm now, he has such athleticism that I think you're going to see a lot of the option game this year from Michigan and more of that read option game with Orji and Donovan Edwards. And Edwards is so dynamic. I think he can really be the leader of this Michigan offense. And I think Michigan's good enough to beat Ohio State again this year. They get Oregon and Texas, but they get them both at home, so you could see 2 more huge wins for the Wolverines there. And if a one-loss Michigan ends up winning the Big Ten on the back of Donovan Edwards, I don't see how he's not at least a Heisman finalist. So I wanted to get a non-QB in here, show some love to the other positions, and I think Donovan Edwards is best placed to do so.
Well, I agree with most of that, except for the part where you said Michigan has a chance to beat Ohio State. I can't get behind that this season. I think if Ryan Day doesn't get the job done against Michigan this year, he will, number one, never do it, and number two, he'll probably get fired. So I think Ohio State has a much more talented roster on paper. I definitely think that Donovan Edwards is a guy that we could definitely see in New York in terms of Heisman finalists, and I'm definitely excited to see the prospect of whether Michigan runs the option this season. That would be incredibly exciting with Orji and Edwards. But number 5 for me is a guy that I gave out as my dark horse, or one of my 2 dark horses a few weeks back, and that is Avery Johnson. Now, we've only seen Avery Johnson as Kansas State's starting quarterback in 1 game so far, and that was the bowl game. I believe it was the Pop-Tart Bowl against NC State. Bowl. And in that game, he was 14 for 31 passing, which isn't great, I'll give you that, for 178 yards and 2 touchdowns. But on the ground, he added 7 carries for 71 yards. And so stepping into this role as full-time starting quarterback for the first time, that's kind of breaking the theme of my list so far. Avery Johnson will not enter this season with a full year of starting at the collegiate level under his belt, but I think his prowess as a dual threat and the fact that they're in the Big 12 facing, let's just face it, not great defenses, I think Avery Johnson has the potential to put up video game numbers this season. I think it's very interesting that Avery Johnson's emergence, in my opinion, prompted the transfer of Will Howard to Ohio State.
Definitely looked that way.
I don't really think Will Howard makes that move if he didn't feel a little pressure and hear the footsteps from Avery Johnson. So those are kind of the logical reasons. And also, I've decided that from now on, I am an Avery Johnson propagandist moving forward. So I'm excited to see how his career develops, and I will definitely be a secondary Kansas State Wildcats fan this season.
Nice. I'm excited to see how that plays out. Johnson's another guy I think has tremendous upside. Obviously, I would not be surprised to see Kansas State take another big step forward under him. I just think that if you're going to see him in New York, it's going to be 2 years from now rather than this coming season. But that is our top 5 for the Heisman this year. If there's anyone you think was left off of both of our lists, I know a lot of you will be thinking maybe Ollie Gordon should have been on this list. But if there's anyone else, let us know. See if there's anyone else you think we forgot. Now, the next list we're going to be doing here today is our top group of 5 teams that we think will take the group of 5 spot in the college football playoff this year. And starting with me, it's going to be the Boise State Broncos, and this QB battle is going to be really interesting between Maddox Madsen and former 5-star recruit to Southern Cal, Malachi Nelson. So far in camp, apparently Madsen has been outplaying Nelson, which is really interesting. Madsen was not as highly touted as a recruit. I think he was a 3-star going into Boise State, but that's going to be a very intriguing QB battle. Then the transfer commit of former A&M receiver Chris Marshall, who has been kicked off of 2 separate teams now due to violating team rules, but is good when he's on the field. So if Chris Marshall can manage to not get arrested or kicked off the team, and this Boise State quarterback battle can get figured out, I think this is going to be a very, very dangerous team. We all know the blue field, the powers of the blue field add at least 2 wins to this Boise State team every year. And I think this team is going to be very, very good. I think they're going to win the Mountain West over competition from UNLV and San Jose State. And I think they are the Group of Five's best hope for the playoff. But the Group of Five's next best hope is, I think, who you have at your number 1 spot.
Yeah, number 1 for me is going to be the Liberty Flames. Shout out to Liberty. Caden Salter is an incredible quarterback, and he's going to be in his final season of eligibility this season, I believe. He has 2 full years of being the starting quarterback at Liberty under his belt. I was honestly surprised to not see him follow Hugh Freeze over to Auburn.
Well, he tried.
And last season, Salter put up great numbers, 177 completions on 290 attempts, nearly 2,900 passing yards, 32 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. So obviously, part of part of the reason I'm picking Liberty as my top group of 5 team to make the college football playoff is because of Salter and just his veteran leadership and decision making from that quarterback position. But also, Liberty's schedule is absolutely dreadful. We've got Campbell to begin the season, then New Mexico State, UTEP, East Carolina, at App State, home against FIU, at the mighty Kennesaw State Owls, home against Jacksonville State, at Middle Tennessee State, at UMass, home against Western Kentucky, and at Sam Houston.
Yeah, the only two difficult games there I see are at App State and Jacksonville State at home.
Exactly. I don't see Liberty being underdogs in any game except for maybe App State, depending on how App State is this season. And so for those reasons, Liberty is my top group of 5 threat to make the college football playoff. I think they have a very viable path to going undefeated, and an undefeated conference champion in this case, I'm pretty sure would be the highest ranked team. So out of the group of 5.
Yeah, I have them at my number 2 spot for group of 5 teams. You mentioned Caden Salter. He is an incredible quarterback, really the heart and soul of this Liberty team. And in a Conference USA that after realignment is looking pretty awful, and you saw it in that schedule there, I think Liberty has a fairly easy path to being maybe even an undefeated conference champion. I just think Boise State will also be an undefeated conference champion. But one of these 2 teams for sure, I think you can bookmark that one of these 2 will go undefeated and represent the group of 5 in the playoffs, and then the rest of the teams after that are kind of who I think we both think the next best shots are.
Coming in at number 2 for me is going to be South Florida and the Bulls, and part of this, the reasoning here for me is Alex Golesh stepped in as the head coach of South Florida in 2023, and they were picked 13th in the American Athletic Conference, and Golesh led the team to the greatest turnaround in program history and the second best in FBS football with a 6-win improvement year over year. And that was capped off by a 45-0 rout of Syracuse in the Boca Raton Bowl. They get their starting quarterback back, and that is Byron Brown. They have a senior cornerback, Ben Knox, coming back, and they are the guys that are kind of representing USF at these media days around the country. And the American Athletic Conference, not necessarily super strong, and I think Golesh has them poised to take another step forward, and I could definitely see USF turning heads once again, but this time on more of a national stage and making the college football playoff.
Yeah, I have USF in my number 3 spot for many of the same reasons. Alex Golesh is an incredible coach. And then their running back room is also pretty good, headlined by Naquan Wright, who is a very good player, especially for the group of 5 level. You mentioned Byron Brown, who is an incredible dual-threat quarterback. This is going to be a fun USF offense this season. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they can do in the American. I think it's really between them and Memphis. I would give the edge to USF, which is why, for me, Memphis does not place on this list. I don't think they're good enough to beat USF, and if you can't do that, you don't really have a route to the playoff, in my opinion, but USF, for me, is in the 3.
For me, the number 3 is going to be Boise State, who is actually Micah's number 1 team. But the reasoning for me is more in the hands of Ashton Jeanty at the running back position,
he's great too.
Who was the Mountain West Conference Player of the Year last season. We already talked about the QB battle that's going on. Micah did a great job talking about that. Jeanty was seventh in the nation last season with 112 rushing yards per game and led the nation in yards from scrimmage per game at 159.7. And on top of all that, he scored 19 touchdowns. So having that guy back in your offense, on top of the fact that you could have a 5-star quarterback in Malachi Nelson throwing to a 5-star receiver, former 5-star receiver, Boise State, I definitely could see making the college football playoff. I think they have more of a path to some slip-ups along the way with a tougher schedule, but definitely a team that I would not be surprised at all to hear their name called that Sunday after conference championship week.
Yeah, obviously, I completely agree with that. I had them in my number 1 spot. Number 4 for me is the UTSA Roadrunners and Owen McCown. Josh McCown's kid was originally a Colorado commit, then left there in a hurry after Shadur Sanders arrived, but carried UTSA to a fairly impressive bowl performance win over Marshall. It was 22 of 31 for 251 yards with 2 touchdowns, did throw 2 picks in that game, but that was his first collegiate start in that game. So this is kind of the poor man's Avery Johnson with Owen McCown's light up bowl performance for the Roadrunners, and this has been a program that's really been on the rise recently. They've really been showing out, and I think this is a team that can really, really surprise some people. UTSA, most people just think of Tariq Woolen, and that's kind of it with the UTSA Roadrunners. I think people think they fell off a cliff after that. They didn't. They kept winning. They're still a very, very good team, so watch out for the Roadrunners this year.
Yeah, I definitely could see UTSA and their path. Number 4 for me is going to be the Texas State Bobcats, who landed transfer quarterback Jordan McLeod, formerly of JMU, Arizona, and Southern Florida. So the 4th stop in the college career of Jordan McLeod, who last season had his best season by far, 3,600 passing yards, 35 touchdowns through the air, and 10 interceptions. You add Jordan McLeod to the fold of a program that is run by G.J. Kinney, who I believe is an emerging star in the coaching landscape, 3rd youngest coach in the FBS, and he has turned around this Texas State program that had not had a winning season in the 9 years prior to his arrival. And first game for him on the scene, they defeated Baylor, which was their first Power 5 win in quite some time. So you add those guys together into the equation, I think that could be a recipe for a college football playoff berth. We'll have to wait and see for sure on that. But definitely, Texas State is definitely a team that is exciting to me going forward into 2024.
Yeah, they're definitely very fun. They are my last team on this list, number 5. And G.J. Kinney is such an incredible coach. Like you mentioned, the turnaround there has been incredible. And Jordan McLeod, obviously, if you watched JMU football last year and you saw them ranked, you know why. He was a lot of the reason they were playing that well. And if G.J. Kinney can put up those kind of numbers with former Auburn transfer T.J. Finley at the helm, who struggles to hit the broadside of the barn at times of the football, just think what he can do with Jordan McLeod at the helm of this offense. I think it's going to be a very explosive team this year. And you look at the Sun Belt, and App State is not what they once were. Coastal Carolina's lost Grayson McCall to the portal to NC State. And so in what's looking more and more like a wide-open Sun Belt between JMU and Texas State, how appropriate would it be if Jordan McLeod takes Texas State over JMU to win the Sun Belt this season? So I think there's a ton of upside for the Bobcats this year, and they are my number 5.
Yeah, that would be quite the storyline indeed. And number 5 for me is going to be the Memphis Tigers. We kind of mentioned how USF and Memphis are going to be the two teams that are going to compete for the American. That game is kind of a coin flip for me, which is why I obviously lean South Florida. That's why they're higher up in my list. But I also think Memphis has a chance to win this game. Memphis returns their senior quarterback, who last season put up 3,800, nearly 3,900 passing yards, 32 touchdowns, and just 9 interceptions. Few other playmakers, including wide receivers and the starting running back returning for Memphis. So the last group of 5 team for me that I think has an incredibly viable path to the college football playoff as that number 1 ranked group of 5 team.
Yeah, if they manage to pull off the win over USF, I definitely think their chances get a lot better. Obviously, we'll have to see what happens in that game, but that is our top 5 group of 5 teams we think you could see in the college football playoff later this year. And now let's get back over some college football 25 news. As promised a couple weeks ago, the dynasty between Kennesaw State and not New Mexico, UNLV, as there was a last-second change to a team with pretty much the exact same colors and a lot more fun culture over there in Vegas for Samuel.
Absolutely.
So Kennesaw State and UNLV will be the new dynasty going forward. It has been set up and it has been started. The Week 1 games have been played, and let me just tell you, as far as recruiting, no one wants to come to Kennesaw State. I filtered by recruits that had Kennesaw State as their top school. There were none of them. I filtered by recruits who had Kennesaw State in their top 3 schools. There were none of them. Only once I filtered by top 5 did I have a few players who wanted to come to Kennesaw State, and 2 of them were kickers. So let me tell you, it's going to be a struggle on the recruiting path for me this season, and the struggles continued on the field as I traveled to Bobby Dodd Stadium to take on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in Week 1, and despite taking the lead 7-0 on an initial pick 6, which, as Samuel can tell you, I was very excited about.
Indeed, he was.
It went just fully downhill from there as the Yellow Jackets just started pouring it on. I turned the ball over a few times, which really didn't help as the game went on. And just it got worse and worse and worse and worse until eventually I lost by about 40 I think it was 66-24 was your final score, and I was down, I think, like 56-14 at the half. So the second half of the game was left up to the sim engine because I didn't want to suffer through the rest of that. But you will see on the screen the various Georgia Tech first half highlights after my one pick six, and it's not been a good week one for the Kennesaw State Owls. Next week, the Kennesaw State Owls will travel to Louisiana to take on the Ragin' Cajuns in what will hopefully be not as bad of a loss.
For sure. And in other news across the online dynasty for the pod, Calvin Ridley. Yes, Calvin Ridley has taken the head coaching job at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And for obvious reasons, Calvin Ridley wants to be very close to the casinos to place his bets. Hopefully not on his own team, or that could result in a very bad scandal. But hopefully none of that happens. But Calvin Ridley has decided that his team will be running Army's option playbook. So this has been a very exciting transition. The problem with this is the roster's not necessarily made up to run this Army option quite yet. We did find a redshirt junior that will be our starting quarterback moving forward. And in other recruiting news, we found a 3-star gym quarterback with 94 speed. So we will be pursuing him heavily as we go along the course of this season. UNLV, as we mentioned, has decent uniforms. One failure on UNLV's part, no black uniforms.
Yeah, how do you not have black unis playing
gray,
in Vegas?
red, and white, which is kind of disappointing.
The grays are cool, though. They're kind of silver. I like the grays.
For sure. And UNLV also started their season on the road, and unfortunately, it was not a great outcome, as was the case for the Kennesaw State Owls. The UNLV, I'm forgetting UNLV's mascot right now.
The Rebels.
Which is very bad. The UNLV Rebels traveled to take on Houston and lost by a score of 52-30. Now, the second half was also simulated in this game, and it was back and forth at first. Teams trading touchdown drives on their opening drives, and so it was 7-6 after the Calvin Ridley suggested we go for two, and we did not get it. Unfortunately,
What if he had a bet on that?
We did a fake halfback shovel pass, and it was not successful. And later on, Houston was just RPOing the defense to death. As you will see on the screen, here is an instance of the RPO turning into a touchdown for Houston, unfortunately. So the margin was a bit too wide going into the half. Did have some positive momentum and scored on a 4 verticals play right before the half that you will see on your screen right now. But the margin was still a little bit too wide at this point. So UNLV also decided that they would sim the second half, and the final score was 52-30. So not a great start over in Las Vegas either by any means, but definitely excited to see how this pod dynasty develops.
Yes, for sure. And one thing I did forget to mention is the new head coach of the Kennesaw State Owls will be Urban Meyer, who has gone down to the Atlanta area to bring Kennesaw State to glory. So
Keep him out of the nightclubs.
I was about to say, no one better to work those Atlanta area clubs than Urban Meyer. Maybe find some recruits in there from the inner city. You never know. But we'll see how this pod dynasty goes. We're both very excited to get it started. And neither one of us, I would say, are amazing at the game. We're solid enough to, if we have a decent team, we can win on Heisman. But with these bad teams, it's going to be a rough start. So don't expect any miraculous gameplay up here. This is more about just building the story for you guys. And we're excited to see where it goes over the next few seasons. But that is it for the world of college football and the college football game. Now over to the MLB. Let's do our winners and losers of the week. And my winner is going to be the Pittsburgh Pirates, who are 8-2 in their last 2 games. Paul Skeens got to start the All-Star game for them, and it's been a great week to be a Pirates fan, which is not something you can really say ever, so I thought they deserved winner of the week this week.
Yeah, for sure. The Pirates have been incredible. My winner of the week is over on the AL side, and that is the Kansas City Royals, who are also, I believe, 8-2. Yes, 8-2 in their last 10, including wins over the Diamondbacks, 3 against the White Sox, and took 1 out of 3 against the Red Sox. And this Royals team has had a lot of surprising faces contributing as pitchers this season, namely Seth Lugo, who has kind of turned his career around, has a 2.38 ERA this season.
Real ones that have been listening to the pod have known about Seth Lugo since the start of the year.
Facts. Cole Reagans with a 3.23 ERA, Brady Singer with a 3 ERA.
Go Gators.
So if the Royals can just find some offense, we'll see what they do at the trade deadline. Outside of Bobby Witt Jr. and Salvador Perez, not really any headlining names in terms of offense for the Royals, but the pitching is definitely there. And my loser of the week is kind of collapsing and opening up a path for the Royals to win their division. So I'll get to that after Micah's loser of the week.
Yes, you mentioned the Royals hitters too, and I want to say I thought you would get more out of MJ Melendez this year. I expected a lot more from him, so hopefully he manages to pick it up. But my loser of the week is Pete Alonso, who is now washed at hitting the balls over the fences for fun, as he was the lowest scorer in the home run derby this year and was instantly eliminated. So I figured we'd have some fun with loser of the week this week and say, what the heck was the polar bear doing in Arlington, Texas this past week at the home run derby? But that is my loser of the week. And now to the more baseball-oriented one over with Samuel.
Yes, the Cleveland Guardians are my loser of the week. Sorry, Cale Downard, if you're watching this.
I'm not. I hate the Guardians.
The Cleveland Guardians are 3-7 in their last 10 and kind of opening the door for the Twins and the Royals to get back into this division race. It seemed like the Guardians pretty much had a stronghold for a few months this season in terms of the AL Central. But unfortunately, the Guardians have learned, and Stephen Vogt has learned, that you cannot rely on your bullpen to pitch 5-6 innings every game, because eventually they will implode. And that is what has happened in the past week or so. The Guardians have been allowing a lot of runs, especially out of the pen, with the starters not really going 5 innings much at all. And so we're kind of seeing the effects of what a long season of taxing the bullpen does in terms of the Guardians. So they are my loser of the week.
Yep, that definitely makes sense for me as well. And then just a couple division things before we wrap up today, and mainly the AL West, where the Houston Astros now lead on tiebreaker in the AL West over the Mariners. Mariners have officially blown it, and the Rangers only sit at 4 games back after a Wyatt Langford walk-off on Monday night. We love us some Wyatt Langford here on the pod, so AL West getting super, super close. And then you mentioned the Guardians imploding in the AL Central. Twins and Royals both only 4 games back. So I think we're about to see 2 very good division races between these 2 divisions that both, about a month ago, looked pretty much wrapped up.
Yeah, and you talk about the Mariners. They led by 10 games in their division just a month ago. Just to echo what you said, I think it's incredible how little offensive production they've gotten this season with how good their rotation has been, especially. Will be interesting to see if the Mariners add a bat or 2 at the deadline. History would kind of indicate that the answer would be no. They've kind of been a cheaper franchise over the years, but definitely the AL Central and the AL West will come down to the wire, and even the AL East. I think that race between the Orioles and the Yankees will be pretty good as well, and the Red Sox trying to climb back into things as well, just 7 games back.
Yeah, Red Sox have fallen off just a little bit recently. They got as close as, I think, 3.5 games and have started to slide back a little bit, but one thing I did want to draw your attention to before we end this was the expected win-loss column here on the MLB standings, and the Reds' expected win-loss right now is 54-47 based on runs scored and runs allowed, and if that were the actual Reds record, they would be comfortably in an NL wildcard spot and just a couple games back the Brewers, and once again, I am sad. But hopefully we can pick up 2 more wins, one tonight in Atlanta with the Nick Martinez day. I keep wanting to say Nick Martini because he's one of our bench bats, but then you guys will probably get a free Game 3 win courtesy of Frankie Montas because he likes to give those out a lot of the time. So we'll see what happens. We'll be having fun the next couple days watching these next 2 Braves-Reds games, but unless you have anything else, I think that is it for this week. So thank you guys for tuning in, and this has been SM Sports Radio on the road.